We're going to talk about lock time frames for a second, real quick, and then I'm going to get into it because there's some definitely cool pieces that we can talk about here. So, like, obviously, we talked about lock time frames. Now that the 4 hours hit, the daily is a lock time frame. We are not going down here to test this daily, right? Like, once we lose that 4, we won't test that daily. I mean, we can, but that's not really the important part about this. That daily time frame is locked. So now we can only use hourly time frames to kind of support our move. So once this 4 hour gets hit, you're starting to use either 4s or 1s, right? Like 4 hour or 1 hour levels. And this is exactly why you would use this here, 1 hour level. I don't know if you would have a 4. You do, it's over here, but that's fine. It's not really important in that part of the move. What's important is that as soon as you hit that daily, right? Like, and this is going to be important for what we talk about next. Or sorry, as soon as you hit that 4, your daily's locked. That means you need to establish on the 1 hour. So in the future, if we go and break this daily, that means we must establish a 4 hour. So this is opening up a couple different doors, and we're just going to talk about locked off time frames real quick. So you hit, like, if we hit the daily, the weekly, like if we hold the daily, the weekly is locked, right? If we hold the 4, the daily is locked, because you can't go back in time once you hit those time frames. You can only move forward in architecture, and this is what creates polarity. So this is a really interesting thing that people will hear this and they'll be like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And it's kind of like a mic drop moment, because what creates that polarity in a lot of these moves is these locked time frames, and those locked time frames give you your exact specifics. So for example, if this 4 hours hit, you must hold a 1 hour. So your 1 hour is the only thing you can buy. You can attempt to buy 15s in the creation of the hourly, but you're going to notice like 15-minute levels here, they don't really do anything. Like you've got a 15-minute level here and here. And so fine, you've got these 15-minute levels, but like, where does your buy happen? You know what I mean? But then you have this hourly, and you can see if we swap to an hourly chart, you've hit the hourly, you reverse it to that 15 that could have hold. That's fine. It's not even a reverse level. It's just hitting the 15. But this becomes not an important level. The important thing is holding this hourly. So you can see how religiously this hourly is holding because it's created by the 4. Now, this creates polarity because it's the time frame that has to hold. It's almost like giving you, imagine a room with 20 doors and you only have now 1 that you can go on. So for example, if we go to the 4 hour charts here, when we lose this daily, that's polarity, because you're breaking your locked off time frames. So this polarizes the move. So your polarity in this move, now this helps you define polarity because your polarity comes from the locked off time frame. So what that's going to look like is and we can even go to a daily, actually. I'll just maybe make it a little easier to see. What's going to happen is, you're going to hold accumulation, and this becomes polarity to the move, because you can't actually technically go back to that daily because your 4 hour has locked that. So this is an often thing that you see. You see a move, hold accumulation, and then this daily becomes hyperpolarity because it's a locked off time frame. So when you lose this, you lose the move. Also, when you have locked off time frames, it gives you your perfect rebuy spots. So the only way in which this daily trend holds the range and you don't create a floating level, like, so you wick below this, the only way that happens now is if you create the 4 hour. So you go here, you break, and you're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? It's like, it sits here in these moments. We can go try to find one. Like, this looks like one right here. You go here, and like, this hits, and you're like, oh, what do I do? Where's the rebuy? What's happening in the trade? That's seen from the locked off time frames. So if you get these, like, I don't know, crazy dumps, or like even, like, where do you make your rebuy, right? Like if you dump here, like, what becomes the rebuy? Well, you have to see the locked off time frames to understand which piece of this would even become the rebuy. It's like, if you go here, maybe it hit a 4 hour and it's the hourly. Maybe it hit a daily and it's the 4 hour. Regardless, all that aside, now you know that if you lose this trend, you must create a 4 hour before you even touch this thing, because it's like, okay, the time frame got locked from the 4, right? Your time frame got locked off from the 4. This is polarity now, and the only move that could stabilize that is now your next time frame, which is your 4 hour. So it gives you like a very clear and easy way to see when something is dumping, or like these knife catch, we can call them even second entries. It gives you a very clear way to see the exact time frame that needs to establish. And once that's established, it's like you buy that sucker every single time. And it's just the same thing that happens here. And you have the 4 hour gets hit, right? Like you have your 4 hour. And this is where we left it off earlier in the week. We had all these levels defined and we said, okay, are we hitting them, the 4 hour here? Are we hitting the reverse level? Are we hitting this 3 minute? Are we hitting the daily? And when you see what gets hit, now you're talking about comparative analysis on a high level. Like when you see what gets hit, you know what to buy next. So like we can just walk through this move and, oh, it's the 4 hour that held us up. Now we must have an hourly. And until you have that hourly, there's no rebuy on this trade. But now you've established that hourly, right? You've hit the 4, you've established the hourly. And you can buy wick or body. I guess you have to make that decision in the moment. But this hourly is going to hold the move. It's not going to be a 15. It's not going to be a 5. You don't have to look for those trails. You don't have to justify anything. No more, oh, we just hit a level. Oh, I had a daily level there. Let's buy the 5-minute level. No, this is like perfect rebuy territory and will give you exactly the time frame that you need to buy. So it takes out all your questioning. Hit the 4, has to establish the 1. So then it's like you just see, and it's like, oh, there was lots of time to buy in here. By the way, you hit this. These are hourly candles. You go to a 5-minute move. You hit this hourly level. You have lots of time to get back in it once you see it wasn't the body that get hit. So you could, in theory, put your buy on the body and be like, oh no, it missed. Okay, just buy the wick, because it's just going to ladder and create that internal piece like this, right? Like it's just exactly going to do exactly this, create that internal piece from here to here. Buy the ladder, you're good, right? And you can see the move goes up off that. I'm sure it tries to break here, goes and fails back down, has this like ridiculous move up, but you can see consistently that it was the hourly that had to hold this move. So like this takes away that guessing of like, I don't know, we just go pick a random spot. Like where's, here's an hourly level. So if it hits this and breaks whatever time frame, if it locks off other time frames, it must establish a 15, right? So now you know the exact time frame it has to establish once you're starting to lock off time frames. Right? And then that's it. There's no other questions. There's no like, oh, should I buy the 15? No, you're just going to miss a trade because it has to establish the hourly. So once you have that, where you have like a 4-hour level, an hourly level, like you could even have said like this was an hourly level if you wanted, just use this exact same thing as that example. That's an hourly level. If this was the case, you're sitting here saying the same thing still. Like if you only hit the hourly, your 4 hours now polarity. Forget this daily. It's not going to do anything. Your 4 hours actually polarity now, right? So it's really interesting because whatever time frame gets hit, and like we have all of these here, and even here, down here, we have a 3-minute level. It's like, oh, you only need to establish the 5 to justify that rebuy. Oopsies, that changed color. You should not do that. Okay, dude. Like even if it hit this level, if it comes down and hits this level, now you know that it has to use a 5-minute level in order to have that rebuy. Like in this example, we used a 4 to the 1, right? In this example, it's kind of a smaller time frame, and you need to kind of establish up at that point because you have this like it's a bit of a laddering in a way if you want to think about it like that. Like we have the daily, we have the 4 hour, we have the 1 hour, right? So in this case, it's like a very easy 1, 2, 3 stepping stone. Like it's like, oh, this is the biggest, this is the next biggest down, this is the next. Like you're just going from like largest to small, oopsies, largest to the next largest to, you're just going down in this fashion. But in this example here, what happens is you have a 4 hour, right? And you're actually not using this stepping down fashion like this, right? Like you're not stepping down into time frames where you've lost the 4 hour, so now you have to hit the daily, or you've hit the 4 hour and now you have to gain the 1. In this case, this was kind of outside of like the chain. Like you're using this as the final level, but you're holding here at that 3-minute level, right? So that's a case where if you don't hit this staircase kind of properly, you actually have to build up a time frame. You have to use the other side of that chart. It's almost like inversing your chart in a way, if that makes sense. So like if you have a 1 hour level, for example, again, we can use this example here too. If you had like a 1 hour level here and you had a 4 hour level here, instead of these both being 4 hour levels, and this was your daily, if you came down below it and had like, say, a weekly level here, and that was the case that you added another layer and it goes below the daily and hits a 4 hour, for example, right? You'd have to then establish time frame up because you're kind of between two levels. So like when you go between two levels like that, right? Because in this case, we're going to the 3, which exists between this staircasing of the levels. Like if this 4 can't hit, it's going to the daily. But then when you have, again, you add another level here, it's like a weekly. If this weekly can't hold, or sorry, if this daily can't hold, it's going to the weekly. right? If something in between that stops it, like if it was a 1 hour level that stops the weekly, the daily from breaking before hitting the weekly, you need to actually establish time frame up, because you actually have to build architecture up now. So there's two ways in which that works, right? So there's the way in which it works where you have your kind of clear staircasing of moves, like hourly, 4 hour, daily. And so if you hit the 4 hour, you need to hold the hour, or sorry, if you hit the 4 hour, you need to hold the hourly. If you go to some in between level, you actually have to build up your time frame. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then this
Thanks.
It makes sense. I just don't know why.
because it's like a staircasing of moves. Like, okay, so for example, this is we're gonna say this is a weekly level here, right? This is a daily level. This is a 4 hour. This is a 1 hour. This is a 15. This is a 5. This is a 3. This is a 1 right here. So like you have to go in ordinance of these things, and it has to do with polarity. Like if your daily is going to be polarity, right? That means your 4 hour level must hit. So in order for the daily to be polarity, a 4 hour has to hit. If this daily trend hit, it wouldn't actually be polarity. Polarity in the move would be wherever the trail breaks. Like, and I don't focus on that wording, like the trail. Don't focus on like the word trail, but just the idea that there's like an architecture of moves, time frames down. Think of decycling nature, where you have to reduce vertices in the chain of events in order to get to your conclusion, right? Like think of decycling as a philosophy for this. Like if you hit this daily, it doesn't make the daily polarity. It just makes it a trend that cycles. And that's why we have trends that cycle, right? Like goes to there, goes to here, goes to here. That's why sometimes trends aren't polarity, right? So like in a chain of things where you're reducing vertices, it's almost like a decision path, right? If this 4 hours hit, you have to establish the 1 hour here. If this 4 hours hit here, then you have to either establish the next hierarchy of the 4 hour or the 1 hour above it. If this daily is hit, like it's about finding polarity. You don't create polarity by hitting this daily here, right? You create polarity by hitting like your 4 hour level and then using the 1 hour time frame to see if you can lose the move. And the daily would be polarity, because what's going to happen here is you're already in this 4 hour queue, right? So you've followed the trail of decycling from a mathematical standpoint. Like you followed the trail of, okay, it's if it's breaking through, I'll make this a bit bigger. Oopsies. Come on. If it's breaking through levels, dude, if it's breaking through levels this way, it has to follow that trail 15 or 5, 1, 3, 5, 15 hourly 4. Like it's like it's trying to break through a bunch of nets in a way, right? And then it gets stopped here, right? It's you don't have, like, you haven't lost the 4 hour, but you're floating somewhere in between, like this spot right here. That's the case where there isn't a defined polarity yet, right? Like if you hit this 4, defined polarity is your trend, right? If you hit a level that falls outside of that, you have to start building timeframes up, because there is no defined polarity. Because what you're doing is you're basically saying like, oh, what was this one here is a 3 minute. Let's move that out of the way. This one here is what gets hit. So now I have to build it up like this way. You have to build it up into those larger time frames to complete that gap. You see what I mean? Like if this is the 4 hour, what you're doing is you're taking all those time frames and you're building them up to recreate that gap. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah. But also if it just went right back up and regained the 4 hour, that would work the same way then, right?
Well, then you're on the 4 hour, then you're in and that's where your reverse queues open. So that's where you get, are we in a reverse level or not? So this is a part of bridge work, which now, like, we would have to go into a whole other thing about reverse levels, but that's where the queue of reverse levels, are we using them? Yes or no? That's this scenario. This completes the yes or no decision in that decision tree. The vertices where you're saying like, reduce everything down. Will we hit reverse levels? Will we create this trail? Right? That comes from this. That comes from hitting an in-between time frame, right? Because even just by the nature of a visual aid, right? Like imagine, okay, let's delete that. Like imagine the visual aid. Actually, let's go back here. Imagine just even visually, like you go below this level, but never hit that daily, right? Like zoom into that and just like, okay, delete this. What does that look like? Hey, we're going to hit a reverse level in the future, right? Like, oh, we didn't quite hit the daily. We have a 4. Oh, look, there's a ladder point from here to there, right? So like, oh, there's a trend. Oh, there's your interior range. Like it just instantly connects all dots through. But that's why we use that chain of reverse levels sometimes, and sometimes we don't, because there's an event that happens where you have polarity defined and you didn't lock off timeframes, or you did lock off timeframes, but you never created polarity. So in this scenario, like let's just delete this for a second. In this scenario, we never created polarity when we hit this level. There is no polarized moment, right? So what happens is you create polarity here because there was no polarization of hit this, lock off this, or hit this, create polarity somewhere else. It's all about what creates polarity, because polarity will be created differently based on what scenario happens. Hit this 4-hour level, polarity is your hourly, and the hold of the move is that sorry, Jesus, I said that wrong. Hit the 4-hour here, daily becomes polarity, and the hourly becomes the hold level for the move, the piece that holds it up and ladders the move continuously. And then that creates, your range trends and such like that, or your local global legacy, and then your interior range trends. Typically it's going to be like whatever you have a float, or it could be here, right? So like polarity is created differently, and the parts of the move that we use to hold are also created differently based on which timeframes got locked off. Like if you can understand which timeframes locked off, you can understand rebuys, and you can understand what theories to use and when. So that's part of bridge work and understanding like how the bridges are built between the possibilities. Does that make sense? Because the second you start shifting these levels like this, right? Like take this away. The second you start doing this with these levels, that's a reverse level. Because think about it. If you have to go through this, 10 different napkins, and all of a sudden you hit this, there's not going to be a reverse level. All you've done is you've created polarity here, right? Like that. So that triggers polarity here. If you go beyond this, but never reach that, and you start doing things like this, right? All of a sudden, all of a sudden, and this one doesn't matter. It's the 1 minute level. We never hit it. All of a sudden, you created this as what you have to gain, which also ends up creating your polarity trail, right? Because that moment where you took all of these and put them in between there, you have to build up in time frames now, right? To regain that reverse. And then that way that becomes your trail of polarity in the future, right? And then the next 4-hour level is here, but you already went through it. You see what I mean? So it's the difference between using hold levels or reverse and when to apply them.
Question, is the current 4-hour move probably exactly what you are trying to explain to us? If you look at that spike, at the 4-hour spike.
You're talking about hitting this.
Is this for you? Okay, and for you it's just simply hitting the backside of that 4-hour.
Yeah, you're talking about this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. I haven't even looked at the top of the charts. Yeah. For now, I would just say it's not hitting a backside.
So it's not that scenario where we actually would need to build now dailies.
Yeah, no, I haven't even done the top side of this chart. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use that on this side of the chart. Not right now.
Okay. I was just wondering because
you can lock off. Sorry. Like if you were to lock off your time frames on the top side of the chart, like I haven't charted the top side for this, so like I would start with the daily, and I would say, okay, like where's polarity in this move is obviously the weekly. So then you're going to go through a trail of, you have to hit your daily next. And I think, when we're talking about trends here, obviously this is not going to work, right? Like this is, you get past this weekly and you have to build up timeframes against this to hold it down. So that would be like the building of timeframes against this because it's on the other side of the weekly. So like we don't have any daily trends here that I would use. Yeah, like literally nothing at all. We do have a 4-hour trend. And then do we have any kind of polarity in here? Like you've got the origin level here. You've got your kind of your hold level here that's been holding. So like I would base this off the origin of the move now. And so I would say, where are some of the levels above that? And there's not really anything. Yeah, so this would just be an origin break. This wouldn't be a scenario where we lock off timeframes because there is nothing here. Maybe if there was like a daily in here, so or sorry, like an hour. Oh, let me hold control here, take off magnet. Maybe if there was like an hourly level right here, that would be different, but then that would have already gotten hit. So if you were at this for origin, if there was an hourly here, you'd have to build time frame down in this scenario. So like what I would do is I'd go here, come on, and I would say like minimum, you have to create a 15 to hold. And if that can hold, the move's good to go. But again, we're not locking off timeframes here, but if we were, that's how you would do it. And then you'd create this and you'd say, okay, this has to hold. And you know, whether this hits or not, I'm not even sure, but that's how you would do it. Right. And then furthering that, like there's not really a locking off of timeframes that I'm seeing here. Like I haven't checked, but I can. You got the 4 hour there, you got 4 here, 4 here. Where's your hourly levels? So the way you can start doing this too is you can start building 4 hourly, but that's not fair because that's a combo to this. So you're getting into combo levels, right? You've got this there, you've got that there, reverse levels, you've got, you know, another one right here. And then that's when you're getting into combo levels too, right? Sometimes you do have a combo level in between a 4 and a 1. Like if you go back to this, sometimes you do have a set of combo levels in here that ends up holding the move, right? Like combo levels, that's another part of the bridge. That's a different lesson. But then there's an implication to combo levels too with bridges. Like when and where do we use combo levels and why? Like why are combo levels used sometimes and why are they not used other times? So right now, just kind of as a starting point, defining that polarity in these moves is kind of one of the most important things, right? Like when you have, and that's just why we go back to this example here when we talked, what would the date have been? I guess it would have been Wednesday, the 17th, right? Does that sound right? 14th, 15th. Yeah, because we did this on Wednesday, 16th, 17th. So like when we were here doing our last session, this is why we defined out this 4 hour, this 4 hour. Notice how we don't have any like 1 hour levels here that I marked. It was just 4 hour daily, and then one in between that could hold the move, because those are your outcome scenarios of this move trying to hold against like a dump, right? It's either it's going to hit this 4, it's going to hit this 4, it's going to hit this whatever 3 minute here, or it's going to hit this daily. And depending on which one it hits, then completely sets your comparative analysis, right? And that's kind of why we left it off there on Wednesday, because we needed to see which one of these levels we're going to get hit to understand like where polarity is going to be in the future, what we need to do on this trade, what we can buy. Like, you know, we hit that 4 hour level. All of a sudden, this is this turns into polarity. Like I wish you could make these levels glow, because then all of a sudden you could just say like, okay, polarity's here. Cool. That's like, you hit your 4 hour, that's polarity. So you're going to get to a point where you go to accumulation. If you lose this, like these aren't going to hold. Like this stuff in here is not going to hold. The only one that could possibly hold is maybe this 3 minute level. If this 3 minute level holds, dude, this thing's going to have to sit here for a while. So this also then bleeds into the understanding of how long do I have to get into a trade? Because this is starting, like when you start building bridges of moves, the amount of faucets it opens is staggering. And for this example too, here, it's like, oh, all of a sudden, this is polarity because the 4 hours hit. We know that. We know daily's polarity. All of a sudden, this hits and holds. Like you would never knife catch this move for the simple fact that this eventually has to build up a 4 hour time frame. Like it's going to be sitting here for a while. Like you have to hold this sucker for a while. Your re-entry points here are like almost infinite. You know what I mean? So like, given the fact that you broke the daily and you need to create the 4, you have the time to make those decisions, and you have the ability to just sit back, let the level hit, and then when it makes a 5, you buy the 5, and then you know it has to make a 15. So like here, think of these points now too as like your check marks, right? Like, oh, okay, broke the daily, hits the 3, right? Okay, let's make a list of check marks that would actually put us in a long position to go like, oopsies. To go like, I don't know, up here. Oh, cool. You want to get up to that point? Okay, let's build our checklist. You create your 5 minute level. Oh yeah. Okay, good. You did that. Okay, buy that. That's good. You buy that 5 minute level. Next is like a 15 minute level here, right? So like you've entered here now because it created a 5 minute hold. Now you're creating your checklist. It's like, okay, it made a 15 minute level, right? Like, or maybe I can just redraw this a little bigger so that makes more sense. Just delete those. Okay. So like you hit your 3 minute level, you create a 5 minute level, right? It's like, oh, cool. You have a 5 minute level there. This becomes like an automatic rebuy, right? Like you've hit your 3, you didn't take that knife catch. This creates the 5, right? Because you're building up timeframes. That becomes an automatic buy. You hit like, I don't know, like this, like that. You hit that 5. Okay, cool. Here's your 15. This tells you you bought the 5, it must get over top of this or you trigger out of the trade. Like all of a sudden, if it does this and like this and like this, out of the trade. It's like, it has to build that 15 minute. So now it's like, oh, here's the 15 minute and it's like this and like this. And eventually it hits and you're like, oh, it held the move. Okay, cool. I'm good to develop the hourly. And then And then so maybe here's the hourly. It's like, okay, 5-minute level got created, check, buy that. 15-minute level, check, buy that. Like we're building a checklist of what we need to happen in this trade in order for us to stay. Goes like this, hits this hourly, goes like that, get out of the trade. Trade's dead, you're dumping, right? Gains that hourly, all of a sudden you're like, oh, sweet, check mark, right? Like, oh, sweet, check mark hit. It's now created a 4-hour level back here. Perfect scenario. Get above that 4. That's derived off the daily, right? So then you have your shield 4-hour built off the inside architecture. So it's almost like you can create a checklist when you understand locked off timeframes, what stops a move, where it gets hit, building up timeframes, because then it has to build further, right? Like it would have to be, you know, the 3-minute builds the 5-minute, the 5-minute builds a 15, and so forth and so forth. And then that's where you see it's almost like interior polarity at every single level. Like it's, you know, you've entered here. This 15-minute level here is polarity. Like it has to get over this level. It has to, or, you know, this is the hourly. It has to get over that. So if you start seeing it, you know, you're building your checklist and all of a sudden you get to one of these levels and it just won't get through it. It's like, dude, this thing's dumping. You know, you should hedge your position the other way because this thing's about to sink, right? Because it goes back to losing the entirety of the move because it's just, so then it'll just create as like a straight drop off. Like get to that hourly, it just creates a straight drop down, right? Because it's trying to build up those time frames. So like it's really neat because it allows you to see like, oh, here's a 3-minute level. I don't have to knife catch that. All I have to do is wait for like the time frame's locked. All I have to do is wait for the 5-minute to establish. And so like 5-minute establishes, like whatever, rebuy that sucker. You're good, right? Like oopsies, like always rebuy that. And then creates a 15. That's that point. Like get out of the trade, stay in the trade. Hourly, get out of the trade, stay in the trade, right? And so forth and so forth. Because it's like micro polarity. It's like microchasms of polarity inside of a move. When a knife gets caught like that, that's the polarity that shows you, should you stay in this move, yes or no, right? So like when you build the bridge to knife catches too, like sometimes scalps can become so easy and quick, and they're like, it's really hard to make a mistake. And then you just kind of go back to this and it's like, it's the same thing. You just like kind of buy the hourly, right? Like you just kind of buy your hourly. Like, okay, fine. Again, you bought it here. You missed the trade, but you had lots of time to get in still. It hits the hourly. Like just buy the hourly. Like you're good, man. You know what I mean? Like that's good. And then here, even like you would want to create the 4 next. Like, you know, you go here and then, you know, you create that 4 right here. But this is a little different because it's not a locked off time frame, but just to follow that logic flow, like then you know, you're going here, right? And you have to hold this, because then you have to hold that. But that, again, that's a little different because the logic flow is changing because we're not using a bridge like that in terms of polarity. Yeah, hourly is still holding. Hourly is actually still holding. I didn't realize it just hit it this morning too.
I actually just got into a long here on this move.
Like on this wick, or you mean a few hours ago?
Nah, just now, the 15 that just got hit as a reentry. Because yeah, that hourly hit again, and I was like, well, if it's gonna keep holding,
yeah, yeah, and you know,
15 would be next.
You know, and when we mark things like this, rejection as a target, that's why. So like if you think back to rejection as a target lesson, and people use that theory, rejection as a target, that's where rejection as a target is used, right? When you're trying to build up timeframes because polarity, because timeframes have been locked off or capped off, and rejection as a target is that polarity of that move because you're trying to build up that architecture, right? So that's where you see rejection as a target comes into full swing. And that's when rejection is a target, because sometimes the 4 hours hold it and sometimes not. And people are left guessing like, oh, should I enter here? And then sometimes they do, and it just goes perfect. And they're like, yeah, rejection as a target. But like rejection as a target is a building of polarity. And that's why it has to have that moment of rejection as a target, because it goes back down to the 1, 3, 5, 15 example of, you know, at what point should you take that, right? And then that's also where you see rejection as a target is the polarity to the dump, right? So like rejection as a target, if this is indeed building up that polarity queue, it's a dump, right? It's a straight down dump, you know, and then sometimes rejection as a target is just like, oh, it does this and it goes like this, and then it just kind of breaks over and then uses that as a hold, right? So yeah, like that goes into this rejection as a target as well. So like when people are using rejection as a target, it should be because rejection as a target is actually polarity for that move, because it has to then gain that because it's a built up of time frames off locked time frames. bridges are really interesting, but also like extremely advanced because you're building out the why as to each single thing. Why is a reverse level used? And when you understand why it's used, then you know when to use it. Why is sometimes a 3-minute hold level on a crazy dump the one that holds it, right? Why is it that we use combo level sometimes? Like when you understand that why, you know when to use each tool. You know, it's like having a spice for a recipe. You know, when you understand what the spice tastes like, you know which recipe to use it in. Same thing.
So is our 4-hour technically now locked off on the bottom because we've been hitting this hourly?
No, because you know what? You're now so okay, wait for hold on a second. Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. You're talking about this hourly here.
Yeah.
Being locking the 4.
Yeah.
No, because the 4 hit here, right? Like when you're doing this, your 4 hit here. The hourly won't really lock this 4 because now you're gonna have interior architecture. Like kind of the point to this move, and I believe we went over this too earlier, is like you have just created this now as well. Right? So like you're just oopsies, that's the wrong one. We need to keep this red. I was trying to do that. Like you've just created local global legacy, right? Like you haven't created all 3, but that's just what this is doing. And then so like you're going back to that 4-hour, right? You're going back to that same queue of like this would be polarity now because that 4-hour, this is polarity to the interior of the move to the 4, and that's it, right? So you're not creating that. And then again, because you've hit this 4, you could, oopsies, because you've hit that 4, you could just interior range this now. So like that's a different type of bridge that gets created. Our example was that you don't know which target is going to get hit next, right? You've got a trend, you've got 4-hour levels, like which target is going to be hit, right? Like that's what this comes in.
Right.
This could be creating interior ranges. Like you've already got this here, so technically you know your 4 hours are still open. So now you know you can go back to here. Oopsies, we want to take that there. Now you can go back to here, and then now you can hit the reverse level. Like now you're opening up that reverse level again. So now you're opening this, right, as a potential candidate to float this to create a float here. You're opening up a different queue because what you were trying to do is say like, oh, linearly 4-hour hit, hourly. Now it has to be the 15, but then you have to also see the other pieces that are created because it's actually just created another daily, which just reopens your 4s, right? And then if it doesn't hit a 4, maybe, I don't know, maybe there was like a 15-minute level in here. Like maybe this is a 15-minute level right there, right? Like take that, go like this. Like maybe this is a 15-minute level. You'll get into that same queue, except instead of having to build a 3 and then a 5 and then a 15, here you have to build the 1 off of this, the 1 hour, and the 1 hour becomes the rebuy, right? So like it's not that you would just, you know, it's almost too linear to do that, to just say, oh, we hit a 4, because then every time you hit a level, like, oh, here all of a sudden you hit a 4, it has to be an hourly. It can't, it can't be that easy, right? Like, oh, or origin on the 4 has to, you know, move against that time frame to break it. Like that's not necessarily true. A hard close could do that and it might not move against the time frame, right? Like bridges get pretty advanced because there's an application for each of them, right? So you've got to be careful of that, of just saying like, oh, we hit a 4, here's the 1, now we have to hold the 15, because then actually you would have just missed the fact that we have a daily trend. And you break that and a 4-hour has to hold to establish that. And then that's not even true, because as long as like the polarity to this would be this part of the move. So then it depends when you're hitting that too, right? Like you might come out here, break this move, and then just create like more off this hourly, eventually break this and then lose the whole thing, right? And then that's maybe when there's a 15-minute level here, for example.
Yeah, that has to build up, right?
Yeah, you build up in time frames when you're between 2 time frames that are locking off the move, right?
Yeah.
Like daily 4, hit something in between 3, has to develop the 5, has to develop that, blah blah blah, has to ends up developing the 4. So like all this ends up doing is saying like, oh, you're here, or like this, oh, you're here, and then reverse level ladder, right? Like this reverse level ladder, right? So that bridge, the way in which we use the bridge is dependent on the move. So we just learn one bridge at a time, because now basically we'd have to go through all these moves and be like, oh, how do they get created? Why and when are they used? Because now you're adding the exacts to all the knowledge that you know, and that's your bridges. That's why last lesson I said if you were to make a course and it would just be on bridges, it would be equal in length to butterfly effect, right? Because you're basically now saying reverse levels, float levels, trends, interior, literally every term that we use, now you're saying like, when is it used? And when you know when it's used, you know when to use it. Or sorry, why. When you know why it's used, you know when to use it. So now you're going through every single thing that we've learned and you're saying this is how the bridge to that piece got created, or this is why and when we use it. So it allows you to know when to use combo levels, allows you to know when to use trends, allows you to know when to take rebuys. You want to scalp something, it hit a 3-minute level. Do you need to hold a 1 minute, or do you need to hold a 5 minute? If it hits a 15-minute level, do you need to hold a 5-minute hold on top of that? Or do you need an hourly hold? You see what I mean? Like the bridge gives you all the pieces of the puzzle that would show you like, this is a floating level. This is when to use it. It's like the instruction manual, I guess is the best way to say it.